December 11, 1941, Berlin, Germany. 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Adolf Hitler stood before the Reichstag and declared war on the United States, dismissing American industrial capacity as half-Judaized, half-Negrified, and incapable of matching German engineering superiority. Within 18 months, his economists would present him with production figures that would make him physically ill. The Americans weren't just matching German output, they were producing more war material in a single month than Germany could manufacture in a year. What followed wasn't just a miscalculation, it was the most catastrophic industrial intelligence failure in military history, and it would cost Germany everything. The German miscalculation began not in 1941, but years earlier, rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of American society and industrial potential. German military intelligence, the Abwehr, had been analyzing American capabilities since the mid-1930s. Their conclusions, documented in reports now preserved in the German Federal Archives, painted a picture of a nation crippled by economic depression, racial division, and industrial inefficiency. Report number 34738, dated March 15, 1938, and prepared by Abwehr Section 3, Counterintelligence and Economic Analysis, concluded that American industrial capacity was grossly overestimated by international observers. The report's author, Colonel Friedrich Weber, cited the Great Depression as evidence of systemic weakness in the American economic model. The document noted that unemployment remained above 10%, that industrial production had collapsed in 1929, and that labor strikes were endemic. Weber's conclusion proved catastrophically wrong. The United States lacks the social cohesion and industrial discipline necessary for total war mobilization. This assessment reflected deeper ideological prejudices embedded in Nazi racial theory. Hitler himself had written in Mein Kampf about the mongrelization of American society, arguing that racial diversity would prevent unified national effort. At a strategy conference on August 22, 1939, days before invading Poland, Hitler told his military commanders that America was not a threat because its racially mixed population cannot sustain modern industrial warfare. The stenographic record of this meeting recovered after the war shows not a single senior officer challenging this assumption. German Minister of Armaments Fritz Todt conducted his own assessment in 1940 after Germany's victory over France. His report to Hitler, dated June 28, 1940, acknowledged American automotive production capacity. Detroit was producing nearly 4 million vehicles annually, but dismissed its military relevance. Todt noted that American factories were optimized for consumer goods, not military hardware, and that conversion would require years of retooling beyond American organizational capabilities. The Kriegsmarine, German Navy, had been studying American shipbuilding with particular interest. A Naval High Command intelligence assessment from November 1940 analyzed American merchant ship construction. The report acknowledged that American shipyards had produced significant tonnage during World War I, but concluded this was an aberration enabled by British technical assistance. The assessment predicted that in any future conflict, American shipyards could produce perhaps 2 million tons of shipping annually, a figure that would prove to be off by a factor of 20. German steel industry analyses proved equally flawed. Reichswerk Hermann Göring, the state-owned steel conglomerate, conducted comparative studies showing that Germany produced 23.7 million tons of steel in 1940, while American steel production, though larger at 60.8 million tons, was inefficiently distributed across hundreds of small producers. The analysis concluded that German centralized production was qualitatively superior and more rapidly expandable for war production. Aircraft production estimates revealed similar blind spots. The Reich Air Ministry's Intelligence Division estimated in early 1941 that American aircraft production capacity stood at approximately 12,000 planes annually, based on 1939-1940 production figures. The assessment noted that American aircraft designs were a generation behind German engineering, and that most American production consisted of trainers and civilian aircraft unsuitable for combat. Colonel Edgar Peterson, chief of Luftwaffe intelligence, assured Göring that American industry could never match German aircraft quality or quantity. The miscalculations extended to tank production. German military intelligence estimated that American tank production would reach perhaps 5,000 units annually if fully mobilized. This figure was based on the fact that America had produced exactly 0 modern tanks in 1939 and possessed only 400 obsolete tanks in its entire military inventory. Wehrmacht analysts concluded that American industry, geared towards automobiles rather than armored vehicles, lacked the precision manufacturing capability for military armor production. Behind these intelligence failures lay a deeper economic philosophy. German economists subscribed to theories of qualitative superiority, the belief that German engineering precision and worker discipline created a multiplier effect, making each German tank, plane, or ship worth multiple Allied equivalents. This allowed them to rationalize lower production numbers as actually representing greater combat power. The economic basis for German confidence seemed solid in late 1941. Germany controlled industrial resources from France, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and increasingly from occupied Soviet territories. The Reich had access to 400 million tons of coal annually, controlled steel production across continental Europe, and could draw on a labor force of millions, including prisoners and forced workers. By contrast, America was still formally at peace, producing butter instead of guns, with an army ranking 18th in the world behind Romania. On December 11, 1941, when Hitler declared war on America from the Reichstag podium, he did so with complete confidence. His economic advisors had assured him that American industrial potential was a myth. His intelligence services had documented American weakness. His ideological convictions told him that a racially diverse democracy could never match the focused power of the Third Reich. Within 6 months, the first signs emerged that every single assumption was catastrophically wrong.
The first tremors of reality reached Berlin in spring 1942, buried in intelligence reports that senior officers initially dismissed as Allied propaganda. By summer, the numbers became impossible to ignore. By autumn, German war planners realized they weren't just losing an industrial competition, they were facing an avalanche that would bury the Wehrmacht beneath an ocean of American steel. The awakening began with shipping. In April 1942, Kriegsmarine intelligence officers analyzing Allied convoy patterns noticed something impossible. Despite U-boat successes sinking hundreds of thousands of tons of Allied shipping monthly, the total tonnage of Allied merchant vessels was increasing, not decreasing. On May 3, 1942, Admiral Karl Dönitz presented Hitler with a disturbing calculation. German U-boats were sinking approximately 700,000 tons per month, yet Allied shipping capacity continued growing by roughly 1 million tons monthly. The explanation emerged from reconnaissance photographs taken by long-range Focke-Wulf FW-200 Condor aircraft operating over the Atlantic. Images of American shipyards revealed something German naval planners had considered technically impossible: assembly-line ship production. At the Permanente Metals Corporation yard in Richmond, California, photographs dated June 15, 1942, showed 18 Liberty ships in various stages of construction simultaneously. German shipbuilding doctrine held that a merchant vessel required 12 to 18 months to construct. The Americans were launching them in 60 days. Naval architect Hermann Burckhardt, assigned to analyze American shipbuilding for the Kriegsmarine, submitted a report on July 22, 1942, that his superiors initially refused to believe. Burckhardt had obtained detailed intelligence on Henry Kaiser's revolutionary shipbuilding techniques. The Americans had standardized every component, prefabricated entire ship sections in inland factories, and reduced ship construction to an assembly process. Burckhardt's report concluded, "The Americans are not building ships, they are manufacturing them like automobiles. We have no counter to this methodology." The numbers told a story that defied German understanding of industrial limitations. In 1941, American shipyards had produced 1.1 million tons of merchant shipping. In 1942, they would produce 5.3 million tons. By 1943, the figure would reach 13.3 million tons, more than Germany, Britain, and Japan had combined had produced in their entire histories. Hitler, presented with these figures in September 1942, reportedly accused his intelligence services of accepting falsified Allied propaganda. But the numbers were conservative, if anything. German intelligence had undercounted because they failed to understand the scale of facilities being constructed. The Willow Run plant in Michigan, built by Ford Motor Company, occupied 3.5 million square feet under one roof, the largest room in the world. By mid-1943, Willow Run alone was producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. The plant employed 42,000 workers operating around the clock. German reconnaissance could photograph the building, but couldn't comprehend the production rates inside. Tank production numbers created similar disbelief. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, opened in April 1941, covered 113 acres under roof. By June 1942, it was producing 1,000 M4 Sherman tanks monthly from an assembly line that moved continuously. A single American factory was producing more tanks in 1 month than German intelligence had estimated for all of American industry in an entire year. Wehrmacht analysts studying these figures assumed catastrophic intelligence failures. The alternative was too disturbing to accept. Fritz Todt, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, finally grasped the magnitude of the miscalculation in late 1942. After reviewing consolidated intelligence on American production, Todt requested an urgent meeting with Hitler on November 29, 1942. According to Albert Speer, who attended the meeting, Todt told Hitler directly, "Mein Führer, this war is lost. The Americans are outproducing us by factors we cannot overcome. We are fighting an enemy whose industrial capacity exceeds our most pessimistic estimates by orders of magnitude." Hitler's response was to deny the data's validity and question Todt's loyalty. Days later, on February 8, 1943, Todt died in a plane crash under circumstances that remain disputed. Speer, appointed as his replacement, inherited the knowledge that Germany was in an unwinnable industrial war of attrition. The strategic implications were becoming impossible to ignore by early 1943. In North Africa, American forces appeared with equipment in quantities that shouldn't have been possible given transatlantic shipping constraints. At Kasserine Pass in February 1943, German forces defeated inexperienced American troops tactically, but were shocked by American material abundance. Captured supply dumps contained more ammunition and equipment than entire German divisions possessed. Major General Alfred Goss, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal Rommel, wrote in his diary on March 12, 1943, "We are not fighting an army. We are fighting an automotive factory that can replace losses faster than we can inflict them." The most disturbing intelligence came from economic analysis of American war spending. German economists studying American federal budgets realized that war production was consuming only a fraction of American industrial capacity. While Germany had mobilized 100% of its economy for total war by 1942, America was still producing civilian automobiles, consumer appliances, and luxury goods while simultaneously outproducing the Reich in every category of war material. The implications were existential. Germany couldn't win a long war against an enemy with effectively unlimited industrial resources. Every German tank destroyed was irreplaceable. Every American tank destroyed would be replaced by 3 more within weeks. Every German plane shot down represented a permanent loss. Every American plane represented a temporary inconvenience. By mid-1943, the awakening was complete in German high command. They weren't fighting a war, they were fighting mathematics, and the mathematics were merciless.
By 1943, the industrial disparity had evolved from concerning to catastrophic. German military planners were no longer asking if they could match American production, they were calculating how long they could survive against it. The answer, buried in classified Wehrmacht economic assessments, was terrifying. Without a miracle, Germany would be crushed under the weight of American industrial output by late 1944 or early 1945. The steel differential told the story in its starkest form. In 1943, Germany produced 34.6 million tons of steel, representing maximum capacity utilizing resources from across occupied Europe. That same year, American steel mills produced 88.8 million tons, more than 2.5 times German output. But the gap was actually larger than raw numbers suggested. Germany was consuming its steel, producing tanks, planes, and submarines. America was producing those same items while simultaneously building factories, ships, infrastructure, and still manufacturing civilian goods. Albert Speer, now firmly in control of German war production, implemented desperate measures to close the gap. His ministry reorganized German industry, streamlined production, eliminated inefficiencies, and increased working hours. The results were impressive by any measure except the one that mattered: comparison to American output. Under Speer's management, German tank production increased from 9,300 units in 1942 to 19,800 in 1943, a remarkable achievement. American tank production the same year reached 29,497 units, and unlike German tanks, American production was still accelerating. Aircraft production revealed an even hopeless disparity. Germany produced 25,527 aircraft in 1943, representing a substantial increase over previous years and straining German industrial capacity to its limits. America produced 85,898 aircraft the same year, more than 3 times German production, while operating at only 60% of theoretical maximum capacity. Luftwaffe intelligence officers analyzing these figures realized that America could triple its already overwhelming production if necessary without building a single new factory. The quality versus quantity debate that had sustained German morale began collapsing under mathematical reality. German officers had long consoled themselves that superior German engineering compensated for numerical disadvantages. A Tiger tank was worth 5 Shermans, they argued. A Focke-Wulf FW-19 could defeat 3 P-47 Thunderbolts. Even if these claims were accurate, and combat experience increasingly suggested they were exaggerated, the mathematics didn't work. If America produced 10 Shermans for every Tiger, and the exchange ratio was only 5-to-1, America still won the arithmetic. Worse, German quality often meant over-engineering that slowed production and complicated field maintenance. A Tiger tank required 300,000 man-hours to produce. An American Sherman required 10,000 man-hours. Even if the Tiger was technically superior, the Americans could produce 30 Shermans in the time required for 1 Tiger. Battlefield commanders facing 30 Shermans with 1 Tiger discovered that numerical superiority had its own quality. The invasion of Sicily in July 1943 demonstrated the practical implications of industrial disparity. Allied forces landed with 2,590 vessels, including landing craft specifically designed for amphibious assault that Germany had never developed in comparable numbers. The invasion fleet transported 160,000 troops with complete equipment, including tanks, artillery, vehicles, ammunition, and supplies for sustained operations. German defenders, though fighting skillfully, found themselves overwhelmed not by superior tactics, but by endless material. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, commanding German forces in Italy, sent increasingly desperate messages to Berlin describing impossible odds. His report of September 14, 1943, documented the enemy replaces losses overnight. Units destroyed today return tomorrow at full strength with new equipment. Our losses are permanent. We are trading veteran soldiers and irreplaceable equipment for temporary delays in the enemy advance. The strategic bombing campaign over Germany brought American industrial power directly to German cities. By late 1943, B-17 Flying Fortress bombers appeared over Germany in formations of 300 or more aircraft. Each raid represented more four-engine bombers than the Luftwaffe possessed in total. German fighter pilots shot down dozens of American bombers per raid, but the Americans returned the next day with the losses replaced and additional aircraft added. The 8th Air Force was losing bombers faster than the Luftwaffe could replace fighters, but American production made losses sustainable while German losses were catastrophic. Admiral Donitz's U-boat campaign demonstrated the futility of fighting American industrial capacity. In Black May of 1943, Allied convoy defenses sank 41 U-boats, a devastating loss representing over 2,000 trained submariners. German shipyards were producing 25 to 30 U-boats monthly at maximum capacity. But American shipyards were now launching merchant vessels faster than U-boats could sink them, even in previous periods of U-boat success. The Kaiser shipyards alone were producing Liberty ships at a rate that exceeded the entire German merchant marine's pre-war capacity. German economic planners studying American Lend-Lease shipments to the Soviet Union discovered another disturbing reality. America was simultaneously outproducing Germany while also supplying complete armies to Allied nations. Lend-Lease statistics showed America had shipped to the Soviet Union 427,234 trucks, 13,303 combat vehicles, 35,170 motorcycles, 2,328 ordnance service vehicles, 2,670,371 tons of petroleum products, 4,478,116 tons of food, and 1,900 locomotives. These quantities exceeded total German production in most categories and represented only a fraction of American output shipped to only one ally, while America simultaneously equipped its own military and supplied Britain, China, and other allied nations. The psychological impact on German forces became evident in letters home monitored by military censors. Soldiers wrote of facing endless American equipment, of artillery barrages that never ceased, of tank formations that seemed to multiply rather than diminish regardless of how many were destroyed. One corporal wrote in November 1943, "We destroyed 20 of their tanks today. Tomorrow, they will have 40. We lost 2 of our tanks. They will never be replaced. How can we win this?" By December 1943, senior German military leaders privately acknowledged that the war was lost. The question was no longer if Germany would be defeated, but when and how much of Germany would remain afterward. American industrial might had transformed from an underestimated threat to an unstoppable force that would inevitably grind German resistance to dust. The deluge had begun, and there was no higher ground. The year 1944 began with German military leadership facing a reality they could no longer rationalize away. American industrial production hadn't just exceeded German estimates, it had transcended what German economic theory considered physically possible. The numbers arriving at Wehrmacht headquarters told a story of industrial might so overwhelming that traditional military calculations became meaningless. American production figures for 1943, compiled by German economic intelligence, documented the impossible. The United States had produced 85,898 aircraft, while Germany managed 25,527. America built 29,497 tanks to Germany's 19,800. American shipyards launched 19.2 million tons of merchant shipping, while German yards produced barely 1 million tons. Perhaps most devastating, these figures represented America operating below its theoretical maximum capacity. Germany, by contrast, had fully mobilized every resource, eliminated all inefficiency, and implemented total war economics. The Americans were doing this while still producing consumer goods and maintaining higher civilian living standards than any other combatant nation. The D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944, demonstrated American industrial power translated into overwhelming military force. The invasion fleet consisted of 6,939 vessels, the largest amphibious assault in human history. This represented more tonnage than the entire German Navy possessed, deployed for a single operation. The invasion force landed 156,000 troops on the first day with complete equipment, establishing a beachhead that proved impossible to eliminate despite desperate German counterattacks. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding German forces in France, sent a report to Hitler on June 12, 1944, that laid bare the hopeless situation. The enemy's superiority in material is so overwhelming that our brave troops can achieve only temporary defensive success. The Americans advanced not with tactical brilliance, but with such enormous quantities of equipment that resistance, however courageous, merely delays the inevitable. We face not an army, but an industrial system that produces faster than we can destroy. The Normandy battlefield became a demonstration of industrial warfare's brutal logic. German forces fought with skill and determination, but faced endless American artillery barrages, constant air superiority, and tank formations that multiplied despite heavy losses. American doctrine had evolved to accept what German doctrine found unacceptable, trading material for lives. American commanders could afford to lose 3 tanks destroying 1 German tank because 3 more would arrive before the week ended. German commanders losing 1 tank had permanently weakened their formation. The ammunition expenditure rates revealed the disparity in stark terms. During the Normandy campaign, American artillery fired an average of 8 million shells monthly. German artillery, chronically short of ammunition, fired approximately 1 million shells monthly, despite desperate efforts to increase production. American supply convoys delivered more ammunition daily than German factories could produce weekly. The constant artillery bombardment, steel rain as German soldiers called it, created psychological effects as destructive as the physical damage. Soviet advances from the east, enabled partly by American Lend-Lease equipment, created a two-front nightmare for German planners. By mid-1944, the Red Army was equipped with 427,000 American trucks, more trucks than the entire Wehrmacht possessed. These trucks gave Soviet forces mobility that German commanders, relying on horses for logistics, couldn't match. American-supplied field telephones, radios, food, fuel, and raw materials enabled Soviet offensives that German forces, despite tactical skill, couldn't contain. Strategic bombing reached a crescendo in 1944 that made earlier raids seem tentative. On March 18, 1944, American bombers attacked Berlin with 1,200 aircraft in a single day. The raid involved more bombers than Germany had produced in the entire year of 1940. Luftwaffe fighters rose to intercept and achieved local successes, but the mathematics were merciless. Germany was shooting down American bombers faster than the Luftwaffe could replace fighter aircraft. America was replacing bombers faster than Germany could shoot them down. The conclusion was inevitable. German fighter pilot kill ratios, once sources of pride, became statistics documenting futility. An ace who shot down 10 American planes had destroyed perhaps $2 million of equipment. If he died in the process, as most eventually did, Germany lost thousands of hours of irreplaceable training and experience. The Americans would replace the lost planes within days. The mathematics of attrition warfare favored the side with deeper reserves, and American reserves appeared limitless. Fuel shortages crippled German military operations, while American forces operated with abundance that shocked German prisoners. Wehrmacht fuel production, targeted by Allied bombing and cut off from Romanian oil fields by Soviet advances, fell to critical levels.
German tanks and aircraft sat immobile for lack of fuel. American forces consumed fuel in quantities that seemed wasteful to German observers. Vehicles idled for hours, aircraft flew training missions, tanks maneuvered freely without regard for fuel consumption. Captured German officers interrogated about fuel supplies assumed their questioners were mocking them when told that American fuel supplies were unlimited for practical purposes. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 represented Germany's final major offensive and demonstrated the futility of fighting American industrial might. German forces achieved tactical surprise and initial success, but the offensive ground to a halt within days, not from American tactical brilliance, but from American material superiority. As panzer formations ran out of fuel, American reinforcements arrived with complete equipment. As German ammunition stocks depleted, American artillery fired without constraint. Within 2 weeks, German forces retreated, having permanently expended irreplaceable reserves, while American forces prepared for renewed offenses with fresh equipment and supplies. By January 1945, the outcome was no longer in question. Germany would be crushed between Soviet forces from the east and American-British forces from the west, both equipped with seemingly unlimited material. The industrial miscalculation of 1941 had become the mathematical certainty of 1945.
The final collapse came not suddenly, but inexorably, like a mathematical equation reaching its predetermined conclusion. By spring 1945, Germany's industrial capacity lay in ruins. Its armies existed only on paper, and the vast American war machine that Hitler had dismissed 4 years earlier was grinding what remained of the Third Reich into dust. The statistics from early 1945 documented the complete reversal of German expectations. In January 1945, American factories produced 9,466 aircraft. Germany, with its factories systematically destroyed by bombing, produced 1,104, barely more than a single American plant. Tank production showed similar disparity: 3,024 American tanks versus 756 German. The Germans were no longer competing, they were merely existing until the inevitable end. Albert Speer presented Hitler with a memorandum on March 15, 1945, that finally acknowledged the obvious. The war is lost. The enemy's material superiority is so immense that further resistance only prolongs destruction without altering the outcome. American industrial capacity has exceeded our most pessimistic projections by factors of 10 or more. We are not being outfought, we are being outproduced to the point where military skill becomes irrelevant. Hitler's response, according to witnesses, was to order Speer's arrest, then to rescind the order hours later. Reality had finally penetrated even the Führer's delusions, though he would never publicly acknowledge the industrial miscalculation that had doomed Germany from the moment he declared war on America. The final Soviet assault on Berlin, beginning April 16, 1945, deployed material that included substantial American Lend-Lease equipment. Soviet artillery, equipped with American trucks, American field phones, American radios, fed with American food, and supplied with American raw materials, unleashed the largest bombardment in history. In the first 3 days, Soviet forces fired more artillery shells than Germany had produced in total during the entire year of 1944. American industrial capacity was killing Germans from both east and west simultaneously. German soldiers defending Berlin found themselves in a surreal nightmare. They faced T-34 tanks built with American steel, transported on American trucks, fueled with American petroleum products. Soviet infantry wore boots made from American leather, ate American canned food, and communicated on American radios. The Soviet war effort was substantially American production wearing a red star. The industrial power Hitler had dismissed was destroying Germany from 2 directions at once. American forces advancing from the west encountered sporadic German resistance that collapsed under material pressure rather than tactical defeat. The 9th Armored Division's after-action report from April 1945 noted, "Enemy resistance is determined but ineffective due to lack of ammunition, fuel, and equipment. German units armed with obsolete weapons face American forces with unlimited supplies of the most modern equipment. Prisoners universally express shock at American material abundance." The link-up of American and Soviet forces at the Elbe River on April 25, 1945, symbolized the complete triumph of industrial capacity over military tradition. German forces that had once dominated Europe found themselves trapped between two armies equipped by American industry. The Wehrmacht, which had begun the war as Europe's most modern military force, ended it using horses for transportation while facing enemies fully mechanized with American equipment. Hitler's suicide on April 30, 1945, occurred in a bunker beneath a city devastated by Soviet artillery supplied through American production. His final testament, discovered after his death, blamed everyone except himself for Germany's defeat: generals, Jews, fate itself, but never acknowledged the catastrophic miscalculation of American industrial potential that had doomed Germany from December 1941 onward. The final German surrender on May 8, 1945, ended a war that American production figures had predicted would conclude exactly as it did. The American industrial system had produced, from December 1941 to May 1945, 324,750 aircraft, 102,351 tanks, 372,431 artillery pieces, 47 million tons of artillery ammunition, 87,620 warships, and 5,425 merchant ships, sufficient to equip not only American forces but substantial portions of Allied armies worldwide. Germany had fought this with production capabilities limited by geography, resources, and industrial capacity to figures that averaged roughly 1/5 of American output across all categories. No amount of tactical skill, soldier courage, or engineering excellence could overcome a 5-to-1 disadvantage in industrial capacity sustained over 4 years of total war. Post-war interrogations of German military leaders by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey revealed universal acknowledgement of the miscalculation. General Alfred Jodl, chief of operations for the Wehrmacht, testified, "We knew we were outproduced. We did not realize by how much until too late. Had we understood in 1941 what American industry could accomplish, no rational person would have supported war with America under any circumstances." Field Marshal Keitel, when asked what factor most contributed to German defeat, responded simply, "American industrial capacity. We calculated they could produce perhaps twice our output. The reality was 10 times our output. There is no military doctrine for overcoming such disparity." The industrial intelligence failure that began with dismissive reports in the late 1930s ended with German surrender in 1945. Hitler's assumption that American democracy could not mobilize effectively, that racial diversity meant weakness, that consumer-focused industry could not convert to war production, every assumption proved catastrophically wrong. The Third Reich, built on mythology of blood and soil and racial superiority, discovered that modern warfare was won in factories, not on battlefields. Superior ideology, soldier quality,